Okay, hello everybody. We are at Masechet Eruvin, Daf Kaf Dalid, and we're going to be starting off with converting. The whole daf is about converting a yard from residential to non-residential, or the other way around. Starting with the topic of planting trees. So basically, if a yard is used for residential purposes, either if a person lives there, you keep the animals there, or if you walk around, it's like a yard that you use. You don't have to necessarily sleep there. Then it can be closed off. It can be as big as you want, and you can carry in the whole thing. But a yard, which is called a karpeth, or like a vegetable garden that you don't walk in and you don't use for regular use, that is limited in size. It can only be up to 2 betse'ah if you want to carry, and not more. And what we're dealing with is what happens if you want to convert from one to the other. So on yesterday's daf, we had a case of where you have a yard that was enclosed originally for residential use, but then you plant something in it. If you plant vegetables in it, now it's not usable anymore, so now you can't carry if it's vegetables or most of it. If you plant trees, however, we said that trees are nice, and you can still walk around among the trees, and so that remains residential use. Okay, since we talked about that topic, we're going to be talking about 4 other basic cases of converting a yard from non-residential to residential. This is the other way around. So how do I do that when I want to convert it? And so we'll see 4 cases. I'll come back to the list as we go forward. Let's jump right into the Talmud with the case of Nita Rubo Hareu Kechaser Mutar. If most of it was planted with trees, it still remains a courtyard, and you can carry, because trees are still nice, and you can have a residential park where you hang out and you enjoy the shade of the trees, unlike vegetables that you're not going to want to walk on. Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Avimi, Vehu she'asuyin itztabelaot. So Rav Yehuda, in the name of Rav Avimi said, only if it's planted in rows. In other words, it's a nice, like nice paths and rows, so that it's pleasant to walk in. That's like an orchard, so that's made for dwelling, not like a forest, which would be not pleasant to walk in. So he limits this possibility. Rav Nachman says, even if it's not planted in rows, even if it's just messy and just trees all around, it's still a courtyard, and people consider it an extension of their house, and it's still usable. That's the machloket. And now just a little bit more discussion on that case. Mor Yehuda ikla lebe Rav Huna bar Yehuda hazanhu lanhu de la abidi isteblaot bekam metaltile begavayu. Right, this rabbi went to the house of Rav Huna, and he saw that the trees were not planted in rows, and yet they were carrying. And so he asked, "Don't you agree? What do you think about? Don't you agree with the first opinion that says it's prohibited and it has to be in nice rows?" And he answered, "No, I followed Rav Nachman, the second opinion, that it doesn't have to be in nice rows, and still it can be considered just fine, a usable area for walking in." Okay, so that concludes that case. And now we're going to be talking about a case of where you have a courtyard that you want to convert to residential use. Originally, when you surrounded it, when you made the wall, it was not. So let's see. Amar Rav Nachman, Amar Shemuel, Karpef yoter mibet sa'atayim shelo hukaf ledira. Kesad hu oseh. Okay, so I have an area that's more than 2 se'ah. And when I originally made it, I did not have in mind that this would be a residential use, a yard. I was just going to put storage there, just a off-limits yard. And so therefore, I would not be allowed to carry there. So again, it's bigger than 2 se'ah. But now I changed my mind. And now I want to bring some furniture there. I want to bring a garden table, some chairs, and I want to start using it. But the problem is, because I originally made the walls having in mind it's not going to be for residential use, now those walls are not good walls to consider it a reshut hayachid for residential use. So I have to do something to fix it. Begodro ma'amido al eser mutar. I have to go to the wall, I have to break the wall, part of it, that's going to be a 10 amot section or a little bit bigger. And once I break it, now the wall is no good anymore, right? It's considered like open. And then I have to build that section back up. And once I do that, then it's okay. Then I can use it again. Right? This is similar to a sukkah. You have to make a sukkah lishma, right? For the mitzvah of sukkah. Let's say I have something that's already there. It's there all year round. I have a trellis or something, right? So I have to do whatever you have to do in that case. You have to take a ladder. You have to go up and you have to push the schach, or you have to move it around in order to kind of remake it. So that's the idea here. I have to undo the wall, and then redo it again by replacing a 10 amma section. Okay, good. So that's the basic case number one, making a new breach and fixing it. Now we're going to get into a bit of a philosophical problem. What if I want to change it section by section? Obviously, if I break down 10 amot altogether, now there's no wall at all, right? I mean, a breach that big nullifies the whole thing. But what if instead of breaking 10 amot and then fixing it, I do a little section by section, right? What do we say? Is that considered, once I do 10 amot, 10 1 amma sections, when I finish, I have 10 amma section that's all new. But at no one time was there a breach of 10 amot. So do I combine all those together or not? So that's the question that we're going to be dealing with. This is actually an ancient philosophical problem called the ship of Theseus. Michael, did you hear that?
Yeah.
You did.
Switch all the parts of the boat. If you switch all the parts of the boat, is it the same boat?
Exactly, right. You have a ship and one plank breaks. Okay, so you replace that plank. Obviously it's still the same boat. You replace another one, until let's say you replace every single plank of the boat, right? Not one part of it is the same. Is that considered the same boat or a new one? This is an ancient problem going back to the pre-Socratics, right? Who dealt with this all the time. And so we have that same question here today. So let's see how we formulate it.
It touches on the issue of matter versus form, like what makes something something.
Right, what makes it what it is, right? I mean, this is a good question for humanity also, because we, the cells of our body replace themselves every 7 years. So, theoretically, we're not the same person that we were a few birthdays ago.
Only if we're determined by matter, not form.
Right. Okay. Good. Unless there's something that holds an identity together that's independent of it. All right. So that's basically the philosophical question behind this. So yeah. Ibaya lehu paras amma vegadar amma uparas amma ugdara al shishlimo lioter me'aser mahu. So I take this 10 amma section and I replace one piece. Right. Just one piece doesn't do anything. Second piece doesn't do anything. But now once I do all 10. Do I consider it, since they're all new, as it that the whole thing is new, and that's good enough, right? Or if I did it piece by piece, then at no one time did I have a breach. So the wall was never undone to get a new name, right? So it has to be really a new wall. Is this considered this section a new section, and then therefore a new wall or not? I'll see the answer. Okay. So the answer is going to be a long one. We're going to compare it to two other cases. We actually saw this in the second half of Masechet Shabbat. But so we're quoting it again. As the Mishnah says, Kol kileh ba'aleh batim shiuran ka rimonim. If I have a utensil, a regular utensil that homeowners use, and it gets a hole in it. So if it's a tiny little hole, it's still a utensil. If it's a big giant hole, it's not a utensil anymore. The difference is for the laws of tum'ah, because something can only become tameh if it is a utensil. So if I take something and break it, not a utensil anymore, so it loses its tum'ah, right? So if I have a utensil and has a hole, how big does the hole have to be so that it's no longer a utensil? The answer is the size of a pomegranate, right? If you put a pomegranate and it falls through the hole, then that is considered too big and it's not a utensil anymore. All right, that's the basic halacha. Uba'ay chizkiyah, nikab kimosi zayit ustamo, v'chazar v'nikab kimosi zayit ustamo, al shishtamol mosi rimon. Mahu, Chizkiyah asked the question, what if it gets a small hole, olive size, and I seal it up. Then another olive size and seal it up. And I keep doing that. Now, eventually, there's enough olive size holes that if you put them all together, it would be a pomegranate, right? But I know one time was there a pomegranate hole because I kept patching it up little by little. So what do you consider that? Do all the holes that I patched up join together now once it gets to a threshold of a pomegranate size or not? That has to be all at the same time. Rabbi Yochanan answers Chizkiah and says, Rabbi, shanita lanu sandal shenifseka achat meoznav v'tikena tameh midras. So he said, Rabbi, you actually taught us this very law. In a different case, if I have a sandal, this is what a Roman sandal looked like with all these straps. So if one of the straps on one side came undone and I fixed it, so it still remains tameh. In other words, because you have multiple straps, if only one goes undone, it's still usable as a utensil, and therefore it's still tameh. And we're talking about a special kind of tum'ah called tumat midras. If someone is a zav, right, has an emission that is a high level of tum'ah, besides things he touches, anything that he rests his weight on, like a shoe, gets a high level of tum'ah, becomes like ava tum'ah itself. So if one of the straps break, that retains that high level of tum'ah because it's still usable. Now, if I fix the first one, but then on the other side broke, right, or the second one broke, and so now what's the law? Do I combine the two breaks together, right? And the answer is yes. I do. They come together, and now it's as if it's not usable at all as a utensil. I mean, it was usable after one break, and it is usable now after the second break because I fixed the first one. But it doesn't matter because there were two breaks. It's no longer the same sandal as it was before. It has two new straps, and so therefore the tum'ah, that high level tum'ah from a zav, goes away. Now it happens to retain a lower level of just touching, because anything a zav touches also is tameh, and the Rishonim all debate why exactly the lower level should remain. Even if it's not a utensil, then it's just not a utensil for anything. But perhaps it is a utensil. Maybe it can't really be used as a shoe, but maybe it could be used for something or other. And really, the idea is that it's still in touch with itself. It's kind of always touching itself. So that low level of touching remains on it. But the higher level of zav does go away because it's like it's effectively like a new sandal. So there you go. That's a case. Rabbi Yochanan is saying, hey, you taught us that very case that it's considered a new sandal. And therefore, we can apply that back. And you said, what's the difference between the first? Well, the second exists. And when the second breaks, the first exists. And you told us it's considered completely new, like a new face. This is kind of like when you have a guest, right? A new guest who wasn't there before, right? So too, this is a new utensil. So too, in the case of a basket that gets a hole in it, even though those little holes at a time, and I patched them up, but once that another hole, and if I took all the breaks, all the holes together would be a pomegranate, then it's considered like a new utensil. So here you go. We actually answered, we resolved the ancient problem of the ship of Theseus. And the answer is, once enough boards change, that it would be no longer be a usable ship without those boards, right? So if one or two boards on top, that's okay, right? But if a big section of the hull or enough boards on top, if those are replaced, and if you didn't have them, the ship would no longer be usable. At that point, it does in fact become a new ship, according to the rabbis. Okay, so that's all those two cases. And now the last line of that discussion, which was a prior discussion, Chizkiah asked that question. Rabbi Yochanan answered it, and Chizkiah was so impressed. He said to Rabbi Yochanan, this is not a human being. Rabbi Yochanan, you are like a superhuman, right? In your intellect, your ability to derive one principle and apply it to another case. Another version was the praise was also high, but maybe a little bit less. This is an ideal human being, right? This is maybe told all the rest of the students, this is what you should strive to be like. Look how brilliant that was. In other words, said, I agree with that reasoning. So now we concluded from this whole discussion that a utensil that is no longer usable, that if you fix something section by section, that you combine them all to be something new. And therefore, we can apply that back in our case. So if I have a wall that I originally made with intention that the yard would be non-residential use, I can't carry it, right? Assuming it's more than 2 betzah. Now I change my mind and I bring furniture out there and I start walking around out there and I want to redesignate it. I have to break down the wall. But I don't have to break down the whole section at once. I could do little piece by little piece, and yes, all the little pieces that I add up will come together. It might be easier to do it that way, and they will add up together to make a new section of wall, and that defines the entire area now as residential use, and I can carry. Okay, good. So that's that very interesting case. Now. We have a second example of a new door that I make to an existing backyard. All right, a backyard that was not residential use because it was not accessible, but then I add a door to my house. Let's read it and I'll show you a picture too. Amar Rav Nachman, im patach lo petach, mutar letaltel bekulo, petach matiro. ולא מרן אלא שפתח ובסוף הוקף, אבל הוקף ובסוף פתח לא. Okay, so I had, sorry, I skipped a line. אמר רב כהנא, רחבה שאחורי הבתים, אין מטלטלין בו, אלא ב4 אמות. So I have an area, רחבה is generally an unused area, that's behind my house. I cannot carry there only 4 amot. 4 amot, like the same as in the Shut Rabim, I can just carry just a little bit. So basically I can't carry there because it's not usable. But, Rav Nachman adds, if I then open up a door, then I can carry in the whole thing. Because now the door makes it accessible and usable. But that's only if I have the door, and then I make the fence. If I have the fence and then the door, then that wouldn't be good. So here's a picture to show you. Right? So here's a fence, a fenced-in area. I use it just to store things. I mean, there's no accessibility from the house, so I couldn't carry. If there is a door there, right now it's accessible. But if the problem is if I made the fence first and then opened the door, that's no good because the fence was made with the definition in mind of it being a non-residential use area. So you got to make sure to put the door first and only then put the fence around it. Okay, so now we ask a question on the statement. If I make the door and then make the fence, you're telling me that's okay. Obviously, that's okay. That's like a regular case of whenever I build a courtyard, I have the door first, then I build the courtyard. Obviously, that's okay. Oh, it's necessary to teach you a chidush, even if there's a threshing floor there. And the threshing floor is would not be a place where you hang out, and so I might think that having a threshing floor there is what I have in mind, and so then I wouldn't be able to use the rest of the yard. And this teaches us that even if there's a threshing floor there, if I built it with having in mind that I'm going to use the rest of it, then it's okay. So it adds that special chidush. Okay, good. Now, okay, now yet another case, a courtyard filled with water. Actually, this is a case of the opposite. It was residential use, but now it got flooded. And so the question is, does this turn it into non-residential use because my courtyard is now filled with water? That's the debate. So it became filled with, it's bigger than 2 satayim, and now it's filled with water. The rabbis at first were thinking, so what about this is like planting it with vegetables, right? I can't walk there where there's vegetables. And the same thing, you're now so flooded, so full of water, so it's not usable anymore. And so therefore I'm no longer allowed to carry. That's what they thought to say. However, Amar lehu Rabbi Abba, Abu Derav Derav Mesharshia, Achi Amrinan Mishemeh Derava, Mayim Kintaim Damu Veshareh. However, this rabbi came along and said, I heard the name of Rava, that they're actually not like vegetables, but rather like trees, which are usable. And therefore, it is allowed. Why should it be like trees? Well, because the water is actually usable. I can drink from it. I can draw the water. I can use it for
I'm sorry,
washing.
Rabbi.
Yeah.
What is the definition of flooded? Is it 1 inch?
Very good. That's the next line. How'd you know?
Oh.
Right. We're gonna address that in a second. This is only if it's usable water, right? Not if it's dirty water or not that you wouldn't want to use. But if it's unusable water, then you're right. Then it would be like putting vegetables there. Then it's not a usable area. So it depends on the kind of water. Now, Rav Ashi addresses how deep it is. Amar Rav Ashi, ud hazian letashmishta namela maran ela she'en be'umko yoter mibet sa'atayim. Even if it's drinkable water, it's only okay if its deep part is not more than 2 se'ah, which is 5,000 square amot. And when we say deep, we mean 10 tefachim high. 10 tefachim, about 30 inches, right? If he's saying if it has a depth of 30 inches for an area of more than 5,000 square amot, then that's too big. And it's no longer, that's like just way too much flooded and not considered usable. It's just too much. If it's smaller than that, then you say it's a nice reservoir of water that I can use. So that's his definition of Rav Ashi. However, that's rejected. Rav Ashi said, but if it's more than that, it's no good. But the Gemara rejects it and says, it's not true because it's compared to a pile of fruit. If I have some fruit in the backyard, how big a pile of fruit can I have? As big as I want, right? That's still okay. And, I'll use it. I'll invite my friends over, whatever. We eat the fruit. But even if it's a very big pile, that's still not a problem. And so this water, it's usable. So therefore, it should not be a problem either. Okay, good. So that's that case. And now we get to the last case of non-residential to residential use. But this is going to be a complex case of connecting multiple different areas. So it's really like a puzzle to figure out this one. All right, let's see if you can figure it out. Okay, certain city that had the following setup. It sounds like this is a real case, not even a theoretical case. I imagine in actual cities, there's all kinds of complex situations that come up. So here's what happened. So I have this courtyard here, which is designated originally for non-residential use. We're not using it, right? People are not using it. And on one side, it opens to a city, to a mavoy of a city. On the other side, it opens to a path that runs through a vineyard. And that path itself opens to a river. That's the case. A bit of a more simplified diagram is this one, right? So some people, there's houses here, let's say. Now you have this area that is not used. So I cannot carry in this area. And it opens up to a mavoy. And on this side opens up to a path to a river. So the problem is that whenever you have two areas that are joined together, if I'm not allowed to carry in one area, then I also can't carry in the adjacent areas. So I need to do something here in order to somehow close it off better, and so that I can permit one of the areas. And once I do that, that will in turn, like by domino effect, permit the next area. So that's basically what we're looking for. Okay. What should we do in this case? If we put a guard, a railing over here, right? And so what I have to do is here's the situation, right? I have this set up, and I'm not allowed to carry any of it because this is non-residential use. But now I change my mind, and I say I want to use this for residential use. Okay, I bring out some furniture and stuff, and I want to use it. Now I want to start carrying. The problem is the same one that we had before. This wall that's surrounding it is a pre-existing wall. And so what I could do is I can break down a section of the wall, 10 amot, and rebuild it. And then it's a new wall that's made for residential use. But obviously, that's a lot of work. Imagine if it's a stone wall, I have to go break it down and get a brick guy and put it back up. I want to do it in a simpler way. So is there a way that I can put up some mechitza that closes some section off in order to do that? Why is this so difficult to figure out? I'll tell you why. Because this opening is less than 10 amot. This opening is less than 10 amot. So I don't have any area here that is a problem in terms of this wall, right? And so I can't just add something. But here's what we're looking to do. We're looking to close off one of these, right? And once I close off either this section or this section, and I make some kind of wall that is a new wall, a new partition for this section, then it can act as a new partition for this section as well. Okay, that's what we're getting at. So the first option here is to put a mechitza here. This is no good because actually the bank of the river is already a partition, right? A steep bank of a river is already a good partition. So there's no point in adding another fence to something that already has a partition there. You're not adding anything new. So that doesn't help us. Enosin mechitza al gabe mechitza. So option 2, לעבד בצורת הפתח הפומד השביל של קרמים. So if I put it over here, and this I make a surat petach here, and by making a surat petach here, right, this would be helpful because now this area has 1, 2, 3, and now a fourth wall. So I'm enclosing this area, and that makes this area usable, and I can carry in here. Now, since I'm doing that, so now this wall, Surat HaPetach, is effectively a new halachic reality. Because it is a new halachic reality that helped the status of this, now it can, by domino effect, be a new wall for this area also. So this could work. The problem is a simple practical one, which is that if there are camels, and the camels are going to go down this path to go get the water, then they're going to pass through this, and they're going to break the Surat HaPetach. So it's just a practical problem. So that doesn't work either. Okay, so that's the two things that Abaye tried. Ela amar Abaye, third solution, לעבד לחי הפתחה דשביל של קרמים. דמיגו דמהניה דשביל של קרמים, מהני נמה לרחבה. Okay, instead of making a full Surat HaPetach here, simply put a lechi, just one post, right? And that will be enough. Here you go, one post. The camels won't knock it down, and that one post will be a kind of imaginary wall that will close it off. And since it's an imaginary wall that's usable for here, then it is an imaginary wall also for this area. And so now see, I have a new wall, a new section that I closed off in this area. So now I can redesignate the whole wall to be residential use. That's his solution. Okay, that's Abaye's solution. Now, right, Demigo here. Demigo, the mahanya l'shpil shel keramim, mahani nami l'nchava. Migo, that means it's important principle, means since it's effective for one thing, therefore it can serve as dual purpose as a new wall for the courtyard as well. So that's Abaye's solution. Amar l'Rava, yomru lechi mo'il l'shpil shel keramim da'alma, says, I don't like that solution because then if people see that this is okay in this case, it's only okay in this case because I have 3 enclosures, right? Because the third one opens up to the water, which is a steep incline. And that's why it's allowed over here. But people that are looking at it will say, oh, I can put a lechi in a more general case. A more general case is where there's a street over here. And if there is a street here, then this only has 2 walls. And something that has only 2 walls, I can't just put a lechi and make it permitted, right? It's only permitted here because it has 3 walls. It's like a mavoy, and has 3 walls. A lechi is good enough. And so this is not good because people will come to think, they won't realize that's only allowed because I have water here as a wall, and they will come to think even if it has 2 walls, a lechi is permissible. So therefore, as a gezerah, Rava says, I don't like that solution. I want to say, find something else. Rather, Ela Amarava, Abdina Lechi Lifitcha de Mata, Demigo de Mahane Lechi de Mata, Mahane Name del Hava. So his final answer is, what you do is you make a lechi here, right, on this side, not the vineyard side, but rather the mavoy of the city. The mavoy of the city already has one wall, two walls, and has something in the back. Let's say it has a surat petach in the back. It has 3 walls. And so that's a normal lechi, that's a closed one. A normal mavoy, that's a closed mavoy. For that, I can use a lechi. So once I put up this lechi, this makes the mavoy permissible. And the lechi acts as a halachic partition, right? A new halachic partition. Since it's a new halachic partition for this side, then I can use it by domino effect as a new legal partition for this area as well. And now that I have one section that's a new wall, now I can redesignate the entire area from non-residential use to residential use, and I can save myself the trouble of knocking down a piece of the wall. And so that is that's a good solution. Now we summarize, Ilkach tiltule b'mata gufe shareh, tiltula berchava gufa shareh, b'mata l'chava, u'mer chava l'mata, eligiba ravacha v'rabina, had asad v'had shareh. So in this case, it would be to carry from the town to the yard would be allowed, right? I mean, I put that lechi there, and then that serves to close it in. And so those are connected, and that's all fine. So within the courtyard itself, I redesignated it as residential use. So that is also allowed. But now the only question that remains is carrying from the yard, within the mavoy, it's allowed. Within the yard, it's also allowed. But the question remains, carrying from the yard to the town or from the town to the yard. In other words, I can carry in this area by itself and carry in this area, but can I cross over and carry from one to the other? That is the question. One says it's not allowed, one says it is allowed. It doesn't say which one's which. But what's the reasoning? The one that permits says nobody lives there. And the one who says it's not allowed says sometimes people might go and live there. What's the difference if someone lives there or not? If people live there, all right, someone hangs out in here and happens to reside, sleep there, he puts up a tent or something. If people live here and people live here, then you have a problem because even if you have 2 reshut hayachids and are owned by 2 different people, then you have, in order to join them, you have to make an eruv together between them, right? I mean, which you could do, but they didn't do that in this case. So therefore, that would not be permissible to carry from one to the other because they have kind of separate ownership. If there's someone living here and someone living here. However, if they're completely empty and nobody lives in either one, then you don't have that problem of multiple ownership of these rishuyot. And then, in that case, they can all join together as one unit, and then you would be able to carry from one to the other. And so in this way, we tried out lots of different possibilities in this complex case, and we're able to resolve it. And this is a really nice case because we're able to combine so many of the various principles that we had so far into one case and see how they all interact with each other in order to resolve it. And the truth is, in modern Eruvin also, you come up with all kinds of interesting and complex situations in which these multiple principles are apply. And those who are experts in Eruv can use all of these different techniques and loopholes and different shitot in order to find creative solutions around them, just as the rabbis did here. Baruch Adonai Olam, amen, amen.